Alive on the moon. Jaro. It's on the pen alive. With your host David Knapp.
Thank you, Stephen Hawking, and welcome to On the Pen Live. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. That's why you're here. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Compound, that pen. It's what we talk about here each and every week as we seek to bring you the latest and greatest news in type 2 diabetes medicine, obesity medicine, and absolutely everything related to GLP-1s. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you for being here. We've got a terrific show for you tonight. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky sat down for an interview with On the Pen. He announced earlier this week his departure from Weight Watchers. You may be familiar with the company that he was associated with, Sequence. He was sort of the main medical guy there. Sequence was acquired by Weight Watchers. We covered that we were all over that news about a year ago on the Pen. And just a year later, we have the man himself, Spencer Nadolsky, here to chat with us. And he talks about, he was an open book. So I'm super excited to bring you that discussion that we had. Such a great discussion, but there's tons to get into. So if you're new here, drop an N for new in the chat. We'd love to welcome the newbies by name because there are many, many people who have been around here for a long, long time now, like Cloakster, Sue the Dude, Carla, J. May, Michelle Hess, an OG. She actually introduced me to Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. I wouldn't have known about him prior to her. So thank you, Michelle. Here we are, full circle, right? Nate, welcome. Thank you for being here. We hope that you'll hit that subscribe button, stick around with us. But we cover all things incretin mimetic news, obesity medicine news, all that stuff. J. Neb, welcome. Corey, welcome. Good to have you here. Anna, Lisa, Spoonie, Ray, Lisa. Trying to make sure I don't miss any of the members. Through the Dude, J. Neb, Kimberly Rogers, welcome. Mimi from Australia in the future. Mimi always joins us from the future. She's over on her lunch break in Australia, mate. And Mimi's on the retatrutide trial in a couple weeks. She'll be joining us here on the Pen to give us an update because she's had just some fantastic progress. I see the Downsized is in the house. Our guest from last week, Spoonie and Sue the Dude, throwing memberships everywhere. Thank you. So good to be here with you all tonight. But we're going to keep rolling right into the show here tonight. You know that we've got a rhythm, a rhyme, and a reason to everything we do right here at On the Pen. And the first thing we do is housekeeping. You want mint for pillow? Housekeeping is the time where we just talk about what's going on the channel. Hey, did you catch this week? If you didn't, I will link it in the description of this video after it's done here. But On the Pen, there was a soundbite on an NPR segment in their All Things Considered program where they were talking about GLP-1 shortages, and guess who they asked all about that? Well, it was yours truly, and they used a soundbite from it. So add NPR. We need like an NPR, something to hearken to NPR and Bloomberg, and so we got the Fortune magazine, but nobody prints anything anymore. So we need something that shows all the different places that have highlighted On the Pen, because we definitely want to give shout out to our friends in the media like Madison Muller over at Bloomberg, who has highlighted a lot of the work that we've done here at On the Pen, including the Release the Vials campaign, which we've got some. Now it's time to release all the vials. I think we'll see those in time. Sandra caught the NPR soundbite. Very, very cool. So that happened. The NPR thing happened. That was very cool. The other thing that I wanted to tell you all about, if you haven't heard, is that we've got a book coming out here in the coming weeks. And the book is, I just want to share with you, I realize that many of you have probably heard this and are sick of me talking about it, but On the GLP-1 Pen is going to be a book that you can read, certainly, but pass it off to all of your friends who you want to understand these medications more, right? You want them to understand that this is not fen-phen, that these medications are leveling the metabolic playing field, that they are changing the game, that they are making it a fair fight against obesity for many, many people, and perhaps pass it off to a friend who may benefit, or just a family member. Do you want to understand more? My heart behind this is that this would foster conversations and a greater level understanding between you and your loved ones. We are in the process of baking into it stories from the OnThePen community. And many of you have sent in your stories. If you could send in your some before and after pictures where appropriate. Also, we'd like to include some of those, but you can send those to dave@onthepen.com. We would love to include some of your stories. And so some of you have already sent those in. Thank you for those who have. We're just trying to find the appropriate places to fit those into the book. I'm so excited to bring this to you. This is a work of love. And so put book in the chat if you're excited about that. But that's what we got for housekeeping this week. I'm sure there's something more important that I'm forgetting that I should be sharing, but yeah, so let's all drop the book emojis in the chat if you're excited about the book. Of course, I would be remiss without mentioning our friends at Ro, who are now the sponsors of OnThePen. It's not a sponsorship in a traditional sense, right? I'm a community advisor for Ro. Another medical advisor for Ro is Dr. Beverly Chang, who was on the show a few weeks ago. But as a community advisor, basically serve in a capacity where I am just basically serving as a conduit between the community, you all, and a company who really wants to continually improve their services and their offerings to said community, right? So as a community advisor, I really relish the role to sort of be the voice of the community within Ro. And so it's been a pleasure to work with them. Of course, they have a program called Ro Body. You can check it out at ro.co, ro.co/OTP for OnThePen. There you'll learn all about the Ro Body program, where patients have worked with doctors to get connected to medical treatments where necessary to fight obesity, where many have lost between 15 and 20 pounds with the help of GLP-1 medications and chronic weight management medicines and lifestyle modifications. Of course, medications come with side effects. They all do. You can read all about those there at ro.co/safety-info/GLP-1. It's right there, but it's all there at ro.co/OTP. You'll be able to find it. Thank you for supporting Ro, who supports us. Of course, we've had Z Ritano, who is the CEO over there at Ro, on several times now to talk about some of their cool tools like the tracker tool and the insurance checker tool. Just some really cool tools. That's really what drew me to them, is that they really seek to make tools that are valuable, that actually bring value to the community, that you don't have to be a Ro member to take advantage of. Hey, the other thing I'll tell you too is Iowa Podcast Awards /vote. So it's right down here, Iowa Podcast Awards. We're up for the Viewers' Choice Awards. There's just a short amount of time left to vote in that. So if you haven't voted already, visit iowapodcastawards.com/vote. Scroll down till you see OnThePen, the weekly dose, and vote for the Viewers' Choice Award. We would love to bring home some hardware, because the tummy over here, I think right next to that would be a great spot to put a podcast award. Of course, the podcast drops every Tuesday. We're now dropping the audio portion of the interviews that we do over here at OnThePen to the podcast as well. The podcast is doing great, but it would do even better if you give it a 5-star rating and review. Reviews really, really help tell the story about what you're enjoying from the podcast. So if you want to jump over to the podcast awards, IOWA. That's right, Patricia. And so, the reviews that you leave on the podcast over at Apple Podcasts or Spotify really, really, really help. Michelle got the early copy of the book. She loves it. We still have to bake in the stories of the community, but awesome. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate that. Sorry, there was more housekeeping than I realized, but we'll continue to move right along through the show because there's just so stinking much to get to, as there is every week. Of course, it wouldn't be OnThePen without talking about what is fresh in the world of GLP-1. What's fresh this week? Well, there is some fascinating news going on right now between the FDA and Eli Lilly. So this is fascinating. If you missed this, have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? The FDA is basically pushing back against Lilly, who is trying to get retatrutide. I have to say it the stuffy way, just to avoid the annoying comments. But we all know that the proper pronunciation is what? Drop it in the chat if you know what the proper pronunciation of retatrutide is. But retatrutide is a peptide, just like its predecessor tirzepatide or semaglutide, as our friend Dr. Nadolsky says. Semaglutide, it's a peptide, long chain of amino acids. And essentially what they're trying to do, Lilly's trying to do, is to get it classified as a biologic. So I wanted to get into a little bit about why this is, and thank you for dropping the proper pronunciation in the chat. It's, of course, retatrutide. So yeah, the biologic designation, if Lilly can get this, right, is basically twofold, right? So there is 5 years of market exclusivity. Once a drug comes to market, it obviously gets a 20-year patent. That's sort of the blanket patent length of time for a medication. And that's from the time they apply for it, which in tirzepatide's case was 2016. Retatrutide was actually 2018. So they get 20 years of patent, but the patent can obviously be challenged. And so if they lose that challenge, they still want to protect these drug companies to be able to make some money off of their investment into basically developing a new molecule. And so when a drug comes to market, a normal small molecule drug comes to market, they get 5 years of market exclusivity, meaning even if somebody decides that they're going to challenge the patent and wins that patent challenge, there cannot be a biosimilar or a generic available for at least 5 years, right? After that 5 years, if the patent has been, beaten in court, basically, or, I don't know what the proper legal term is. I'm as much a lawyer as I am an endocrinologist. But once that patent or once the exclusivity period is over, those biosimilars can come to market if the patent gets beat in court, right? Otherwise, you've got the whole length of the patent that is pretty safe, right? Here's the deal. If a biologic comes to market, it actually gets 12 years of market exclusivity versus the 5 years of a normal small molecule. So the bigger news here, I think, in sort of further investigation, and some people who are smarter than I am sharing about this on Twitter, hat tip to Clark Kent, who was talking about this on Twitter, biologics cannot be compounded. It's actually illegal to compound a biologic, even in times of shortage. So now I think you're seeing something telegraphed here about the story. Like it's like they cannot stop the compounding of tirzepatide the way that they want. And so they're sort of coming at retatrutide from the front end and saying, maybe, just maybe we could, Justin, thank you for becoming a member. Maybe we can get this designated as a biologic so nobody can. Right. You're getting it. And interestingly enough, and I don't know how this happens, but there are already telemedicine companies that are offering retatrutide. People tagged me in like 4 videos on TikTok just last week of med spas offering this. I have no idea how they can get away with this or around this. I have no clue. But basically the FDA is fighting it. And so they're taking it to court. They're suing the FDA, which I got to think is like something that a big pharmaceutical company would rather not do. But you may be seeing some testing of the waters of that other piece of legislation, that Supreme Court ruling on Chevron, which I don't want to get into this because, again, I'm as much an attorney as I am an endocrinologist. But the Chevron case was basically a Supreme Court ruling a couple months ago that basically narrowed government agencies' ability to interpret loosely written law. And so basically it can put some of that more loosely written law into the hands of courts. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe that'll come to play. Maybe it won't. People who are a lot smarter than I am will sort of wrestle with that. I thought that maybe the compounded tirzepatide, that's the way that they were going there. Could be. We'll see. But yeah, as Nate points out, great point, also indicates how effective Retta is. And I mean, our friend Mimi in Australia, who's in the chat tonight, is on the retatrutide trial over in Australia. I mean, not only is the weight melting off, but she's maintaining muscle mass. She is improving her lipid panels. I mean, she's going to come on and share all this. I don't want to steal the thunder from down under, but she is going to share a little bit more. It's just amazing what this retatrutide is doing for people. Absolutely amazing. So that's what's fresh this week. Of course, there's other things that we can talk about, but you're all here to hear Dr. Spencer talk, not me yip yap on and on and on and on. So we're going to get to some trash. Let's take out the trash together. This is some trashy news. So today, Eli Lilly doubled down on their gaslighting of people on Zepbound and Mounjaro, and basically updated their shortage list to say it's all still available. So the FDA shortage list was updated actually on the 3rd of September here. And Eli Lilly reconfirmed that all the doses are commercially available. If you have experienced something else, drop that fake news emoji in the chat. Sabrina's way ahead of me. On cue, Sabrina. So yeah, definitely slaps in the face of the reality. That's why it's so important to hashtag report the shortage, because Eli Lilly is going to tell their story to the FDA, right? They're saying we can supply distributors when they order it, but we're going to the pharmacy, and the pharmacy's saying something like, we're not sure when we're going to get it in. We can't order it from our distributor. So the stories aren't always matching up. And that's why it's so important to use our voice to tell our story. And there's actually a mechanism built into the FDA website that allows you to do this. But the FDA website is rather cumbersome to use, but you can do it there. DJ with the $25 super chat. Thank you very much, DJ. So I can't remember what the FDA one is. You can Google it. Very easy to Google it. Just do report drug shortage FDA. Or you can just do it the easy way and go to ro.co/supply-tracker, or just type in GLP-1 supply tracker. Ro has built a really easy to use tool that also reports your shortage to the FDA, but it's also going to do something else for you that I think is rather cool. It's going to, people use it when they find their medicine. So if you find your medicine, go there, use it and say, hey, I found my medicine in, wherever you live. And they're going to alert other people who have used the shortage tool and say, hey, people are finding this dose in your area. And so it's just a cool way to crowdsource where you can find medicine. And it also accomplishes that hashtag report the shortage goal, right? And so just a super cool tool that, again, this is why I love Ro. They are making such amazing tools that are actually valuable to the community. So Andrea says she can't find her 10 milligrams in Madison, Wisconsin. And that's, I mean, it just continues to be the case, but it definitely seems to depend on where you are in the country, right? And that all has to do with how the supply chain works for these medications. But that's just all we're doing is telling our story. Lily's going to tell their story, and the way that we tell our story is to hashtag report the shortage. So use that hashtag when you watch other videos to encourage other content creators to use it. If you yourself are a content creator and you're talking about this, use hashtag report the shortage. It's just the right thing to do to tell the story of the community. Michael with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Michael Clinton. It's been a pleasure to have you along for the ride, and thank you for all of your support and your comments on my videos and everything. I really, really appreciate it. 10 is also hard to find in Silicon Valley. I know Cloakster 10 milligrams seems to be one of the harder ones to find for some reason right now. It's the one I keep hearing over and over, even though it's been a long time since I've heard people having trouble with the 10 milligram dose. So that's the news, right? The FDA shortage list was updated by Eli Lilly on the 3rd with no change. All doses of both versions of tirzepatide being shown as commercially available. Take it for what you will. Now, to get to the reason that you're all here, which is the interview with tonight's Hot Channel. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky is right up there at the top of my list for medical professionals that talk about obesity with the nuance that it deserves. And so I really, really have for a long time been an admirer of Dr. Spencer's. And we've been on a texting basis for a while now. And I am so I don't know how that even happened, but it did. And I'm thankful that it did, because to have resources like him at your fingertips are like, people don't get that. Like, and he's just such a good dude. He finally had the ability to come to OnThePen now that he's announced his departure from Weight Watchers. I'm not going to give it too much more of an introduction because the guy sort of speaks for himself. This was a fun one, guys. I am so thrilled to be able to introduce tonight's hot channel, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Enjoy. Such an exciting interview to bring to you all tonight. I've been waiting to do this for a very long time and so excited to bring our special guest in tonight, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. You may remember Dr. Spencer from basically being the visionary and the driving force behind Sequence, which was a massive game changer in telemedicine, of course, acquired by Weight Watchers. And Dr. Spencer has been working with Weight Watchers to integrate Sequence into their program for the last couple of years here. And now he has announced his departure from Weight Watchers. So he's here at OnThePen to share a little bit more about his future plans and just rap about his extremely unique perspective on obesity and obesity treatment. I'm super excited for this conversation. Dr. Spencer, if you're not aware, is a obesity and lipid specialist physician who focuses on exercise and nutrition as medicine. And we are so excited to bring in tonight's hot channel. This is Dr. Spencer Nadolsky.
Hot channel.
Hey, we're doing it, man. Welcome.
Finally, it's about time.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate you making time for the OnThePen community. I know that so many are going to be so excited to hear this conversation. I was introduced to you actually by some members of this community. My friend Michelle Hess, who's contributed over here at OnThePen since the beginning. She introduced me to your content. And as soon as I saw, like, I was probably the memes at first that sucked me in, but after that, your perspective on obesity medicine and just the nuance of treating patients with obesity, I've really appreciated. So I'm excited to share a little bit with you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Of course. Anytime now that I'm now with a big public company, I can come on anytime and chat.
Well, you have an open invitation here. Always glad to have you here. And yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. You created and launched this amazing company called Sequence, right? Tell everybody a little bit about what Sequence is, what it was, what it is, and how it kind of came about, and how you got partnered with Weight Watchers.
Yeah, I like to go back in time and look at, like, so I went to residency and graduated in 2014. So medical school, you go through classroom, you kind of pretend to be a little bit of a doctor, but you don't know, you get a lot of information, but you don't know how to actually practice medicine. Like medical school is funny like that. So then you go to something called residency, and that's where you do your specialty. I did family medicine. It's the broadest of all specialties, and you can specialize a little bit further after that. But during residency, I was like, man, the way medicine's practices seems like archaic. Like, I'd get 15 minutes with a patient, and they'd have to take a half day off work. Some of these people, it was an indigent area, so people would take a bus. You know, it just didn't make sense to have to do some of these chronic disease treatment plans when I could have just done it online and texted with them, and real quick. They didn't have to go from their house. So that spawned into, I was doing some private practice after that. But really, I got into telemedicine in 2016 before it was cool. There was a startup company called SteadyMD who I helped get launched back then. And for Sequence specifically, in 2021, when Step 1 trials came out, Wegovy wasn't approved yet, but a couple of like Google engineer guys came to me on Twitter and said, "Hey, do you want to do obesity medicine online?" I go, "Yeah, I think telemedicine is geared for obesity medicine because it kind of removes some of those stigmatizing barriers of going to the doctor's office. People don't trust their doctor anyway, because they've asked for help before and they say they need to eat less, move more, and basically eat, I've actually heard some of my patients have to see another doctor in another room next to me. And I could hear the doctor seeing one of my patients because I was booked and they weren't for the day. No, you don't need some of this medicine. You need to eat chicken breast, spinach, and egg whites. And I was mortified. The patient had messaged me later. This was back in like 2015. They were so like demoralized. Mm-hmm. So telemedicine, in my opinion, it was like made for chronic disease and obesity medicine specifically, due to a lot of the stigma and bias that we see. So when these guys came to me, I wasn't technically a founder, but I, a little bit of a stakeholder, because I was like employee physician number one type of thing. Okay. I told them, I was like, look, the only other places that are out there right now are Calibrate and Found at the time. And I was looking at their social media, and they were, they had raised tons and tons of money, and on paper were worth a lot and were the big names. I said, we're gonna blow past these people, because watch what happens when we start being the first social media company out there utilizing it correctly. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't even have to do much on TikTok, and things would go viral. My Instagram was already, I don't even have a big TikTok following. My Instagram is much bigger, but I would just make posts here, posts there, and you would see these spikes in signups. And so the other thing that we did was we wanted to create an EMR. They created the, I'm not a tech. I like tech, but I'm not the engineer. So these engineers created an EMR kind of around what I'd say would be efficient for helping patients. If you help the physician be better with patients, the patients will do better in the long run, because the doctor will like doing it, and it'll be kind of this nice little loop of help for each other, patients and doctors. So they created a whole custom EMR, and we were off to the races. Within like a year. So I brought in the first patient like November 2021. And then I can't remember what Weight Watchers acquired us at. We were over 20,000 patients, but in a year. And actually, the story of how Weight Watchers found us, they wanted me to be on their scientific advisory board. They didn't know Sequence existed, and so they set up a call with me. And I remember going at the end of the call, I was like, this whole time I thought you guys wanted to buy my telemedicine program, Sequence. They're like, oh, what is this? Within a couple months, it was they were like, boom, 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 bought. It was an really interesting experience. So yeah, it was fun. A lot of learning there.
Yeah, no doubt. So really at the front end of treating patients with obesity through telemedicine, which is really, a ton of foresight. And I think it's a natural sort of progression for somebody like you who really sees uniquely patients who live with obesity as people. And as I kind of talked about when I was introducing you, you have a keen sense of the nuance of the disease and how it differs from person to person, and how you can't just tell somebody to eat less and move more. Like, you may have been one of the first people really sort of hearkening that line, that mantra on social media, and really is caught on. And so many people have sort of adopted that as their own sort of phrase that they use to describe their experience with their doctors, that eat less, move more mentality. Can you tell me and kind of give us an idea, Dr. Spencer, about how you became passionate about treating obesity?
Yeah, so good. So, some of the things that I harp on, I had those same biases when I was younger. Like, so it's easy for me to put myself in the shoes of some of these other people that just seem like ignorant about it. So I became passionate on it. So I was into sports. I used nutrition, exercise science to get myself really good at athletics. I went on a scholarship, wrestled at UNC Chapel Hill. I was their heavyweight. I was a lighter heavyweight, like 250. You could get up to 285, but like, pretty, muscular and strong. But I used science to get myself that way. Now, when I go to medical school, everybody thought I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's kind of the stereotypical thing. It's a big meathead, strong guy. Me like bones, crack bones, put erector set, bones, drill. First of all, if you saw my handyman work, you'd be like, don't let this guy drill into my bones, number one. But number two, it just, I like physiology more. And there was something about like, I didn't want to, and then other people thought maybe you could get into sports performance. I was like, I don't want to help people go from a 350-pound bench press to a 400-pound bench press, or you know, a 4.8 40-yard dash to a 4.6 40, whatever, something like that. It had no interest. I like doing it for myself to get better at sports, but helping other people do that, I don't know, wasn't fulfilling. What I wanted to do was I wanted to prevent and reverse chronic disease. Like, it just, when a patient goes from not being able to walk around Disney World with her kids or grandkids and just can't even enjoy life, to being able to enjoy life, that 0 to just even 5 miles per hour type of thing, as opposed to 0 to 60, very, very fulfilling. Like, it just felt good to help people do that. And then it wasn't until like later in med school, hanging out with, because I thought the same thing. I'm going to help people eat better and chicken breasts, breasts and spinach, that type of thing. Like, and I didn't understand why those who struggled with their weight couldn't do it. You know, those biases I had, because growing up, I didn't have, my body wanted me to be thinner. I could tell. I had to be a heavyweight, I had to force feed myself. So I had those biases. It wasn't until like I was really interested in helping people, you know, lose weight. I'd go to these conferences. I'd started working with doctors and listening to lectures, going, there's, you know, they're saying things that I understood. There was inflammatory things that were happening from adipose tissue, but the inflammatory effects that then affected the brain that actually caused people to have appetite derangement. It was really interesting to me. And it really wasn't until I started working with patients where I was like, okay, it's not as simple as just telling people to eat fewer calories. Because, like, why couldn't you? Why would you, if somebody's in that much pain from their weight, and not just physical pain, but emotional pain and pain from, you know, maybe having to inject insulin or whatever type of medicine for their chronic disease, why wouldn't they change the way they eat? And so getting into the biology and physiology was so interesting to me. And then talking to patients and going, you know what? My patients say the same thing. And it would be like, it's so condescending to tell people, especially when they knew exactly what to do. They're like, everyone said, I know what to do. I can't seem to be able to do it. And so that's where I got really into the physiology and biology of obesity and going, oh, and then back then we didn't have the GLP-1s. They were just coming out, actually. So Byetta, so if anybody's listening, Byetta was the first one. It's exenatide. It was a twice daily injection. Not very powerful for weight loss, but people lost a little bit of weight. It was made for type 2 diabetes. Then Victoza came out. That was liraglutide. That's a once a day injection. People on here might know it as Saxenda. Liraglutide was 1.8 milligrams for diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Saxenda 3 milligrams. That was out in 2014. So I was just starting to use them, but there were older medicines like phentermine, if people know what that is. Qsymia is a combination of phentermine and topiramate. And I was using a lot of these medicines, and patients would always say, like, I finally feel like what somebody who doesn't struggle with their weight must feel like. I don't have that drive to want to eat a second portion of whatever they're eating that night. Even if it was like a healthier, low calorie, high nutrient density type of food or meal, sometimes they'd want to get another portion. They just weren't filled. So now with the medicine, they felt like, I didn't feel that way anymore. So it kind of confirmed some of what we were thinking, is that, hey, maybe obesity isn't just a behavior problem, it's a biological problem. And it just made so much more sense, especially once you give them the tool that helps them do the behavior that they already knew that they already knew it. They like, I know what to do. I need help doing it. So just telling me what to do is not going to be very helpful. So I got really interested in it. And then I got into lipids as well because, you know, weight and everything in our lifestyle affects some of these downstream things. I just love cardiometabolic health, helping people keep their heart healthy and keep their muscles healthy and have a better quality of life. So it was very, very fulfilling, more so than just like, you know, I like lifting weights, but like more so than helping somebody just go from a big squat to a bigger squat or whatever,
right.
whatever else.
Right. I get what you're saying 100%. I mean, to be able to help somebody achieve more is a noble pursuit, but to be able to change somebody's life from a life of pain, where they're really just not living because of their chronic disease, and to be able to find ways to work with that person to reverse or get that disease into remission and they can live again, I can see how that would be a lot more fulfilling. Curious on, so you sort of got into this around the time where it sounds like around the time that Saxenda was coming out. At what point in your practice did you realize that the future of obesity management was going to be extremely tilted towards these treatments, these GLP-1 incretin mimetics?
Probably semaglutide, Ozempic, and then especially Wegovy, because it was just higher dose. Ozempic only went up to 1 milligram at the time. It goes up to 2 now, but semaglutide, when step 1 came out, so Saxenda, the scale trial, you know, somewhere around 7 or 8% total body weight loss. Qsymia gets 10, 11%. So Qsymia at the time was better than Saxenda.
Can I just park on that one for a second? Because when you talk about Qsymia and Topamax in particular, because everybody, pretty much anybody who's struggled with obesity, pretty aware of what phentermine is. But can you talk a little bit for a second about why that combination of the sort of upper that you get in phentermine and then Topamax, which is actually like a anti-seizure medication?
Yeah.
What is it about those two in concert that really helps people out? Because there's a lot of people who can't get access to GLP-1s, don't have coverage for GLP-1s, and have doctors that are like, they want to put me on this Qsymia, but that's not a GLP-1. I think if you could talk to that a little bit, that might help some people.
The Qsymia is like, it's actually, that stuff should be first line, as long as somebody doesn't have what we call a contraindication to a reason they can't take it. So phentermine has a adrenergic effect on norepinephrine up in the brain, and that we've known that to have appetite regulating properties. Topiramate affects GABA. It's a different part of the brain that may control a little bit of appetite and craving specifically. And so the concept with the medicine, if you crank up phentermine too much, you start getting those sympathetic type of symptoms. So like a little bit faster heart rate, palpitations, kind of anxiety, you know, I feel like I'm on some speed or something like that. If anybody drinks too much coffee, I always joke about how, like, man, I'm tired, I drink coffee, now I just have anxiety and I'm still tired. Phentermine, kind of that sympathomimetic, they call it, properties. But topiramate also, it was for, you know, for seizures, but then also for migraines. And people, when they start going up in the dose, they start getting more side effects. So the concept, but people would lose a little bit of weight. So the concept is using lower doses of each to keep the side effects low and have this. They don't seem to be synergistic. They're probably more additive, if I had to guess. Whereas Contrave actually probably they need to be used together, and I can get into that. But the bupropion, naltrexone, but phentermine and topiramate, probably there doesn't seem to be a reason that one helps the other, whereas they're additive and you can use a little bit lower doses. So topiramate, people do notice, like, it's used for binge eating disorder. It's used for nighttime eating, and it helps. The problem is you can get some numbness and tingling. Their soda tastes flat when you use it, and some people can get stuff. Yeah, so that's whenever I post about it, people are like, that gave me terrible side effects. I'm like, yeah, you know, you may have had to go on higher doses of it, and then you start getting side effects. So Qsymia, lower doses of each, and it's the only long-term approved use of phentermine. People off-label, people use phentermine all the time, by the way, for longer periods. It's supposed to be only used for 12 weeks at a time. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's the way they studied it, back in the 50s or whatever it is. But Qsymia, approved in 2012, they approved it for long-term use. Honestly, like that's the higher doses do better than Saxenda, which is still, liraglutide, expensive drug. When you look at the average amount of weight loss. Now, probably the future would be even a little bit lower doses of all of them, potentially. But Qsymia is a good drug. It's controlled, though. Phentermine is a controlled substance. It would be nice if they took it off the controlled substance list so we could use it more via telemedicine. So you do need a DEA license. Before COVID, you're supposed to be seen in person. Right now, with the COVID laws, you're allowed to prescribe it without seeing them. I don't know if that's going to change here in a few months. We'll see if they grandfather or keep the laws to where you can still prescribe it. But if anybody said, like, if you're relatively healthy, you don't have heart disease, and you go to the doctor and they say, well, you got to try Qsymia first, don't think it's a bad option. It's actually pretty good. So for anybody listening. Yeah,
for sure. So thanks for clearing that up, because I know there's just a lot of people who've brought that up recently. Like, doctor wants me to go on this, and I don't know a ton about it. But so Qsymia was around, and so it really took Ozempic and Wegovy kind of coming around for you to really see like there might be some actual future to the development of these medications.
So yeah, Wegovy comes out around 15% weight loss. So remember, Saxenda was around 7 or 8%. So we essentially double the effectiveness, the efficacy of Saxenda, and then we, 50% benefit compared to Qsymia, and we see bariatric surgery is around 25 to 30%. So we're like, oh wow, now we're like halfway there. Amazing stuff, pretty amazing stuff. Side effects, some nausea, people are having that. And the real kicker, though, is once MOUNJARO came out, it was only approved for type 2 diabetes, but of course they had the MOUNJARO coupon, and everybody's like, just prescribe it. Give it to me off label. Okay, fine. I had never seen, like, Wegovy was great, but like MOUNJARO was like, wow, this is like a cheat code to figuring out food noise. It just, people would even say, I'm tolerating it better. I don't have as much nausea. Now, when you look at the studies, it doesn't look like that much of different side effects, but anecdotally, people tolerated it much better. And the weight, even on just low doses, the weight was just coming off. So it was clinically to see. I mean, you see it in the studies. It's like, okay, that's a lot of weight, but like to see it clinically and have people say, no, I've been on Qsymia, I've been on Saxenda, and I still had that food noise. I still struggled to lose weight, and then to get on this, and it was like a whole different thing. And then you're talking about retatrutide, and just there are people I'm in contact who are in the clinical trials for that, and of course they know they're not on a placebo because they're like,
right, their weight's melting off.
It's just melting off, and their metabolic markers are just improving.
Liver reverse, the whole, we talked to several of them here too. It's crazy.
The future is ridiculous, and so I did an interview about the future of this, because you got the bariatric surgeons who are basically saying, hey, bariatric surgery is still number one. It's still the most cost effective, and I agree with that. I will say though, just like computers and phones and things, and how the technology is it's just gonna increase. I think the same thing. I mean, we can get into the compounding thing, but like, these drugs are expensive right now, but at some point, these peptides are not, they're not going to be as expensive. It's going to take 10 years. Maybe it takes 10 years, 15 years. And people are like, I don't have time for that. But there's going to be a point where they're cheap enough and everybody's producing them to where, I don't know. I've talked about this before. I don't think anybody should be using it for vanity purposes. And when I say that, I mean like small amounts of clinically insignificant weight loss, not people who have clinical amount of weight that want to lose it for vanity purposes because even though they have an indication to lose it. I'm talking about like a a fitness model using it for a few pounds. So I don't recommend it for that, but it's possible that in the future we see, I mean, you see with semaglutide, there's probably a benefit, of cardiovascular benefit, regardless of any weight lost from these medicines. And so I could see a future where maybe I'm taking semaglutide, maybe I'm taking a little bit of, maybe I'm taking my little orforglipron. I don't even know who knows what could be that we say, oh wow, this does have some non-weight cardiovascular benefit. And you know, you see people on TikTok and all over saying my rheumatoid arthritis is improved, my inflammatory bowel disease is improved.
Anything with inflammation, pretty much.
So people were worried because of the GI side effects. So many people were doctors especially were very cautious about, like, oh, this person has inflammatory bowel disease, I don't think I should prescribe this, I'm worried. I'm like, there's absolutely no contraindication for somebody with inflammatory bowel disease. And this is back when I started 2021, started using a lot of these, and those patients, I wasn't scared to use them. These patients were like, my symptoms are improved very quickly. You know, if weight loss was had a part in it, maybe it was just to decrease the amount of food coming in. I think likely we already know there's an immunological modulation going on from the GLP-1 receptors. So I think there's something, these drugs are just like, I don't get, and by the way, I always say this on every podcast, people will be like, this guy's a fanatic about these medicines. I don't get paid by Big Pharma. I get like, maybe I do like a lunch and meet with some of the scientists. And so they pay for my lunch. It's like $30. If you can actually go on open payments and see how much I get. I specifically don't take money from Big Pharma just so I can talk about them. And I just think they're amazing drugs. Like, I think they're just going to revolutionize medicine. And that's why they're talking about giving the discoverers Nobel Prizes, because they're
absolutely, they should. Absolutely
amazing.
Yeah. I get the same thing here. And like, listen, I'm a patient who's benefited from these medications. And, you know, I just really, what OnThePen is I like to take all the information that I learn, whether it's from Eli Lilly earnings calls or you know, some of the papers that are published on these medications and how they're helping different comorbidities of obesity, and just putting it in a patient-centric way. That's what we do here at OnThePen, so that people can go and have more confident and competent conversations with their doctors about what's out there and what might help them. And I get the same thing, like, oh, this guy's too close with Lilly and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, like, this is, if Eli Lilly wanted to buy me a yacht and fund my retirement, then I'd absolutely take it in a heartbeat. Let's not get it twisted, but they don't, and they have
put the little Lilly symbol under your pen back there.
Right, exactly.
Sponsored by Lilly. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. Like, there could be, the thing is, I also want to do trials. I want to be part of some of their new trials that they're coming in, some Viking and some of these other places. I want to be as independent as possible, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm always, you know, open.
Yeah, you're willing to discuss. Willing to shill. So awesome discussion. You touched on one thing a little bit earlier, and I do want to kind of broach this topic with you, because I know that within the community of people who use these medications, especially for weight management, the second that I have a doctor on the show or go on a different podcast or whatever with somebody who has been sort of like openly like against compounds, it's like, oh, that guy's anti-compound. Like, forget all of the advancements that people like you and Dr. Mike Albert have done in just like reducing the stigma around the conversation about treating patients with obesity. It's like the first thing they go to is, he's anti-compound. Yeah. So if you don't mind, like, can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
What are your views, and like, why have you been, let's say, like, hesitant to like maybe embrace that?
Yeah, it's really due to, so I was very against it. It seemed like a little bit of the wild west. People are adding B12 to these things. I've visited various state pharmacies that and look, I was in residency when the whole meningitis thing went down in 2012. Like, it was a big deal. And I know everybody says, well, because of these meningitis breakouts back in over 10 years ago, they've improved everything. And it's like, okay, but we're injecting these drugs. We're not talking about skin creams. We're going past our usual barriers of defense, skin, our digestive tract. We're going straight in through our skin and injecting something. Like, you got to make sure this stuff is sterile. I started doing more due diligence into it because it's just the shortages were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on all that.
Well, you had to start weighing as a physician. I would think you would have to start weighing like the cost benefit of like making somebody go back down a dose that maybe wasn't going to be effective, or up a dose too quick, or like, and then you have to like sort of start weighing the treatment options because the shortages force you to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm like, okay, so you see some of these places that are coming out doing it. You know, I looked up, you know, some of the pharmacies. A lot of them are these 503As. I went down the rabbit hole of understanding the 503B, and I'm sure you've talked about all these things on here before. And the one thing I couldn't get past was the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient. Like, where
there's no transparency in it at all.
It's tough. So the thing is, though, when you look at the legal language, because that's the other thing. It's like, is this even like legal? I know Lilly doesn't want to be. You know, they send out the scary letters and things like that. But when you look at it, if it's a shortage, they are allowed to do it. But I was like, but where are they getting the API? So I've called multiple of these pharmacies, and some of them won't share. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. But some of them are very transparent about like
the pharmacies themselves.
Yeah, where they get the API from.
Okay.
Now the thing is, then what I found out is that the API of some of these places, I was even on there was a roundtable with the Compounding Pharmacy Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, smart guy, very smart guy, and they went over a lot of the kind of the myths, and of course they're biased. The thing is, these pharmacies are also biased. They want to sell this stuff.
100%.
So it's like, it goes both ways. You see the people on TikTok, you know, giving me grief, like, you just want to make money from big pharma. I'm like, I don't make money from big pharma. I'm just trying to keep my patients safe. The ironic thing is, some of these TikTokers are making probably more money than I'm making.
A ton of money.
Selling
thousands of dollars a month. Shilling compounds.
Yeah, I've heard stories about like checks of 50 grand to random TikTok. I'm just like,
yeah, it's wild. Wow. Yeah, and people are woefully ill-informed, especially on TikTok, of just the whole medical system in general. But yeah, go on.
So Mike, this is what I've talked to like a lot of people that are staunchly against compounding. I've had private conversations with them. I go, okay, I'm trying to understand like your viewpoint. What if they could make an essential copy, which is what the language says they have to make an essential copy? That means all the way from the inactive ingredients down to the active ingredients, semaglutide, the peptide. What if it's essentially a copy? They're like, well, what about the source? It always came back to, what about the source of the API? And here's what I found out. A lot of the API, specifically semaglutide, it's made synthetically instead of in a recombinant manner. Now, I actually want to go see how they make this, because when people talk about recombinant, you use yeast, and they have to use the yeast creates these peptides. I want to go see it happen, because like, I could see I could just see a laboratory putting this together and be like, what is going on? So you talk about recombinant, but synthetically they do it via chemical reaction. So if anybody's watching this, if they remember organic chemistry, and I had to do all this stuff, right on the board, and all these chemical changes and double bonds changing and adding groups here and there, really interesting thing. So then it's like, okay, well, is there something different between synthetic and recombinant peptides? because that's the, okay. So that's the question, because people are like, well, where are they getting this stuff? So the FDA actually considers them equivalent if they're under 40 amino acids in length. I was like, okay, well, how many amino acids? And yeah, I can't remember exactly which one's tirzepatide and semaglutide, but they're under 40 amino acids in length.
Right.
So then I go back to my friends who are staunchly against this, who are big clinicians in the field, and I'm like, if it looks exactly the same under the various analyses that you are doing, and even the FDA considers them to be equivalent as generic, meaning like if they were to come out with a generic, they would be allowed to do it. I started sitting back going like, I'm in some of these physician Facebook groups, and there are some people staunchly against, and there are some people that are very, what we call cavalier about it, just like, yeah, let's just sling this stuff.
Yeah.
I take the middle approach, going like, look, why don't we weigh, if you can produce them in a way that like is essentially a copy and use them for what they're used for, meaning like during a shortage. I started thinking like, how could I don't even know how to argue against it. If it's sterile, if you know it's sterile, it's pure. So that was kind of my line of, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not.
Would you say it's fair to, would it be fair to say that Dr. Spencer is warming to the idea of compounded GLP-1?
Yeah, I would just say I'm not staunchly against it. I think some of the smarter people out there would be like, okay, verify the source. The thing I worry about like patients is they're desperate. They're in pain. They want a cheaper medicine. They can't, their insurance isn't paying for it. Are they going to go to do their due diligence and verify the source? Basically, go down the rabbit hole of verifying the source, or are they just going to trust whichever prescriber is the loudest on TikTok, talking about it? So I would just say, like, if I've never prescribed, I haven't prescribed a compound. I don't know if I ever will. What I'd say is I will not be making any posts staunchly against it. I would rather do what I want to do. I actually want to do a podcast. So I have a Docs Who Lift podcast with my brother. I want to get a pharmacist on there to talk about these processes a little bit more. Because when you talk to some really smart pharmacists about it, they're able to go into depths that like you see that's not being talked about on TikTok. I mean, I got on the phone with some of these pharmacists and grilled them down to whatever, and you could tell they had a depth of knowledge that was just so good that they've thought about all these different things as well. Anyway, I'm not against it. I'm not necessarily like gung ho, but I'm not.
You're doing the due diligence, right? I think, which is what we all should expect of our physicians, is that they've done the due diligence to know, because there's so much unknown in the process. Like, you've had to pull at a lot of threads, understanding the difference between 503A and 503B pharmacies. There's a huge difference in what, sort of oversight happens from the FDA, right? State boards versus the FDA, mass producing versus individual scripts, all that stuff. I think, to kind of get at, the other angle is that what I'm seeing from patients within our own community here is when they cannot get access to branded medication and their prescriber is anti-compound. I will tell you what happens in 85% of these situations is those people go to the gray market, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants anybody Walter Whiting it up in their bathroom, making their own version of whatever. So with God knows where that stuff comes from.
Here's an interesting thing though, like Lilly and Novo, the ball's in their court. Like, guys, you don't want compound. Like they send these scary letters. Like, then make enough of the stuff. You don't have of it, and make it cheaper. Yeah. Problem solved. Nobody will be using these compounded versions. Like, they won't be able to, because it won't be on shortage. I mean, maybe they're going to try to skirt around, but then if you make it affordable enough, why would you go get the more risky stuff when you could get the purest version of it?
That you have to look elsewhere. Right.
Yeah, you won't have to look up. So I think, you know, I think for businesses out there that are relying on it, I mean, you can look at the stock analysts of what they're saying about, you know, HIMSS and everybody else like that, where it's like, hey, is this going to be around in a couple of years? Are you going to rely on this income? I think some of these telemedicine places will be flashes in the pan because of it. But you know what? They made lots and lots of money in the meantime, and you know, hopefully people weren't harmed. You know, if I saw some people talking about if you go in like the FDA, you can see side effects and issues that have come from the various peptides, tirzepatide and semaglutide, and yeah, if compounded versions have been associated with multiple issues, but you know, even the FDA versions, people have side effects and problems. People can die, and it could be related, it could not be. It looks like these medicines help decrease death, you know, which is amazing. But you know, I would just, it's hard to make any, there's not been a head-to-head comparison, and that's why, you know, it's not FDA approved, but it's, if you make essentially a copy, I don't know. It's hard for me to make an argument against it if it's literally the same thing under all the different types of analyses that you can do to verify the peptide and amino acid sequence and length and all the inactive ingredients, mass spec, and all these different types of analyses. So yeah, I'm not against it, not for it. Just do your due diligence if you're thinking about it. You won't hear me making anti-compounding posts.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think, like, on behalf of the community, I'm super thankful for smart minds like you who are willing to go that level deeper, because from the community perspective, people just go pro compound, anti compound. Yeah. They don't understand all of the scientific stuff that goes into this stuff and the processes and everything. And your number one job is to just be a good steward of your position and to make sure that your patients are safe. Yeah. And so I appreciate somebody who approaches it with a thoughtful mind. Dr. Spencer, I know you got a jet here. Where can people find you? Where
so you know, if you're on TikTok, I'm Dr. Dr. Spencer, I think is I don't know how I got that one, but on Instagram, it's Dr. Nadolsky, DrNadolsky. Twitter, Dr. Nadolsky. You can also, I have a podcast, Docs Who Lift. It's with my brother, obesity specialist, endocrinologist. And we go over all sorts of things, health, fitness. We're going to get into some menopause stuff here soon. So yeah, I'll be happy to come on anytime. Now that I got a lot of free time on my hands.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for lending some of it to us today. Really appreciate it. It's great to meet you finally. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll get the chance to do it again.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky joining us a lot for this interview on the pen. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you go give him a follow. Check out all of his social media channels. You will not regret that follow. Thank you again to Dr. Spencer for joining us. What did you think of that? Now, I got to tell you, this was one of the highlights of On the Pen for me. I have been hopeful that this would happen. I've got to know Dr. Spencer a little bit, just corresponding over email and text over the last few months. And I've always been like, I really hope this guy comes through and will come on the show and share a little bit, because the bottom line for me is that people like Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, and I'll also throw people like Dr. Mike Albert and Dr. Beverly Chang, have done yeoman's work on changing the dialogue around obesity to help remove the stigma from the provider point of view about treating patients who have obesity. Because put it in a chat if this has been your experience. Say me if this has been you. You go to your doctor, and no matter what it is you're dealing with, you have acne. Well, that's because you're overweight. I have migraines. That's because you're overweight. Fill in the blank. Whatever you're dealing with. I have a cold. I have a cough. I can't shake this virus. It's because you're overweight. And the answer is always, well, you just got to eat less and move more. People like Dr. Spencer have changed the paradigm. They have changed the conversation in the medical community as it relates to how people with obesity are treated by their providers. Is there still a lot of work to do? Yes. But it is people like Dr. Spencer who have absolutely begun to shift the conversation and actually started to treat patients with obesity and talk about it with the nuance that it deserves. Because there are universal experiences that people have who struggle with obesity. You saw all the me's that just got dropped in the chat there. There are some universal experiences, but the actual condition of obesity is so nuanced from person to person. That's why you see people who super respond to these medications. You see people who don't. You see people who respond really well to bariatric surgery and people who don't, depending on which surgery they get. But even within each surgery, some people do really well over time. Some people not so much. It is a nuanced disease. It is a disease that is riddled with shame, guilt, baggage, trauma, fill in the blank. And it deserves to be discussed with nuance and care. And Dr. Spencer is right at the top of the list for medical providers with a voice in that world who have done it with care and compassion. And so I admire Dr. Nadolsky, and I'm extremely thankful that he gave some of his time to the stream tonight. Extremely thankful for each of you for joining each and every week on the pen. I'd just like to maybe give it a couple of minutes here as you're thinking, you're all sort of getting ready to end the stream here with me. What was your favorite part of that conversation? What stuck out to you the most in tonight's conversation with Dr. Spencer? And then while you're thinking about that, if you don't have something right away, there's a little thumbs up button. If you hit that, that will ensure that more people see this video as it goes out into the world as we finish this live stream tonight. But what was your favorite part of the conversation tonight? For me, I love to hear how Dr. Spencer has evolved on the topic of compounds, not because he's shifted, I think, more maybe towards the center. It's not where he's landed. It's that he did the due diligence, because I think for many, it would have been very easy to just jump on it. But for whatever reason, and you heard from him early on in his residency, was when there was some major issues with some compound pharmacy injectables leading to, I believe they were injectables that led to meningitis outbreaks. That shapes how a person approaches this when they have the great burden of caring for somebody's health and well-being. And so I think a lot of these doctors take a lot of heat for not immediately jumping on the bandwagon. I love that Dr. Spencer did the work to dive deeper into the nuance of this, and that he has evolved his thinking on it over time based upon the facts and data that has been presented to him. That was my favorite part of tonight's conversation. Mink said doctors' emphasis on metabolic health and what these drugs can accomplish for patients was their favorite part. I think that's a really astute point. Corey says genuinely caring and willingness to press into researching compounds. That is exactly echoing kind of what I was just saying there. His honesty, Anna says, he's exceptional, says DJ. Yeah. So yeah, it's just amazing conversation. So thank you to Dr. Spencer for lending some time to the stream. He has said that he'll come back. So if he does, drop in the comments what you'd like to see next time as we talk, hopefully again to Dr. Spencer. Shelley says his take on telehealth or telehealth. Did you pick on that? Telehealth. His take on telehealth and his forward thinking. He cares about people. I 100% agree. And RDP says his research and openness. I'm 100% with you. What a great conversation. Drop in the chat what you'd like to hear next time. Until next week, you all know what comes next, because I like to leave you all each week with a blessing because you matter to me. This community matters to me. What's going on here at On the Pen is special, and the world is starting to see that it's special, and that's exciting. But I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. Let me leave you with this blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Until next week, have a great week. Can't wait to do it again with you all. We'll see you on the next one.